the sports betting network.
This is the VSiN Morning Line on VSiN, the sports betting network.
Good morning. Happy Monday morning and welcome into the VSiN Morning Line. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi and Harrison Sanford. Excited to be here starting a new week with you. Oh boy, guys, it was a bad day to be a favorite in the NFL. Upset City, the biggest losses of the day, Cowboys, Ravens, Niners, Lions. Favorites finished the day 8-6 straight up. Underdogs go 8-5-1 against the spread. We're going to get into all of it. But first, Michael, how was your weekend? Your biggest takeaways? Tell me about it.
Well, it was a tough one. I mean, most of my handicaps, it was you have to reevaluate. And then when you look at the box score, you're not sure that you really were wrong on the handicap. Jacksonville, Cleveland. I mean, what happened there when you look at the box score? How about some of these Detroit, Tampa Bay, you look at that box score. But look, here's what we do know. Underdogs of 6 or more points are 8-0 against the spread in the first 2 weeks. So it's the best start for big dogs in the history of the NFL. That's what's going on. And I think ultimately what we all have to do from this past weekend is learn and take down, obviously, the mistakes you made, the handicap. And I know this. I assumed Sean McVay's teams were going to be better prepared. That wasn't the case. I assumed that Mike Tomlin as a dog wasn't a good play. That wasn't the case. And I think, Harrison, you've got to take these 2 weeks into account. And I think September football is probably the hardest football for anybody to handicap.
Yeah, no, it was definitely difficult, especially if you were somebody like me who had a lot of overs because the under hit at a very successful rate. And I'd also say it, too, as we're trying to evaluate Michael and Grace, it would help if we didn't have 10 games in the 1 p.m. window. Trying to have your eyes on every single matchup here. Granted, I didn't spend too much time watching that Panthers debacle, but trying to keep your eyes on everything else is difficult. I'm not a fan of the 10 games in the 1 p.m. window. Spread them out a bit more so we can get our eyes on these games in earnest so that we could become better bettors and more profitable. That would be my one request from the weekend, Grace.
Harrison, I was literally sitting there on the couch thinking the same thing when you texted that to our group chat. I was like, this is way too much. And now I'm kind of bored in the afternoon. Yes. At least give us 4 so we can have the complete quad box, Yeah.
And then one of them's a dud. I mean, they let Kyler Murray run around and all of a sudden, beep, beep, he's making throws down the field. They can't tackle him. And that game you had to take off the screen. So we're down to 2 games, really, at the end of the day, and easily could have put 1 in there. It was a weekend where you're watching the games and you're thinking you have a flow and a feel for what's actually happening in terms of Tennessee, the Jet game, for example. I mean, there they go again. Will Levis can't wait to turn the ball over. They get another punt blocked, and the Jets end up covering that number. And all during the game, you're thinking the Jets aren't going to cover this number, and Tennessee has a chance. But I think the biggest theme, though, Grace, was the fact that red zone offenses were atrocious. Red zone offenses is what killed most teams. I mean, how about the Washington Commanders are 0-6 in the red zone and still win the game? Think about that. They're 0-6 in the red zone. Now, New York lost their kicker on the opening play of the game when he pulls his hammy on a return. But, of course, that got called back. My man Scott Novak will never disappoint with his presence in the field. So that touchdown got called back. Then they go 0-6. And still beat the New York Football Giants. I mean, it was a crazy weekend. And I think, to me, all you could do is lick your wounds and get ready to prepare for next week and know that, you can't always predict, and the box score doesn't always predict who's the better team.
Yeah, I agree. I think September football, a little bit hard to predict because you're still, adjusting, expectations. I mean, I know you're not a model guy. That's where I was going with that. It's kind of hard to adjust your power ratings when they're new teams, with new players, lots of changes in the offseason. But we learn a lot. I felt like we learned a lot this week about certain teams. Other teams we didn't learn so much. We went backwards, like with the Cowboys. But we'll get into all of it. Let's take a look at what's coming up on the show today. 2 guests joining us. In this hour, we have Carl Johnson with some Bookmaker insights from this weekend's slate. Then later on in the show, former NFL quarterback Rich Gannon at 8:30 Eastern with his NFL Week 2 recap with Michael Lombardi. Coming up in this hour, we're going to take a look at some of these surprise 2-0 teams. How good are they actually, or are they just getting lucky? Taking a look back at Week 3 of the college football season, and then again getting into those weekend betting upset or insights with Carl Johnson. So let's start with the Bengals and the Chiefs, guys. Chiefs win 26-25 on that walk-off field goal from Harrison Butker. Maybe controversial DPI at the end. I don't really think it was, but these games are always close. Yeah, good. I'm glad you said. Twitter always goes crazy. I mean, I get the reputation the Chiefs have, but that one was pretty blatant. Anyways, Michael, what was your takeaway from that game?
Look, I think Cincinnati proved to us that they can compete with Kansas City. Kansas City wins the game. Mahomes throws 2 interceptions. They still win. Kansas City, was able to run the football. We know the Bengals can't stop running the ball. But again, this game comes down to Cincinnati's inability to cash in the red zone. They're 2 for 4 down there in red zone efficiency. And if they score a touchdown just one extra time, they win the game. But look, they had opportunity. I think clearly what we see is deficiencies in Kansas City. There's no question. That offensive line for Kansas City was not very good. The left tackle, we talked about it all summer long. That's going to be a problem because they don't have that covered, whether it's Morris or the young rookie who I can't pronounce his name, and nobody seems to on the broadcast either. Tony Romo couldn't do it, so I don't feel as bad. I think, to me, that's an issue. Mahomes made some plays. Obviously, he turned the ball over. Since he's resilient, but at the end of the day, since he just couldn't get the stop, and since he doesn't stop the run, if they don't get control of the game by playing better run defense, it's going to be very challenging. Once again, Zach Taylor starts the year off. He's now 0-6 the last 3 seasons in opening day games, and Baltimore's, fortunately, they're 0-2. I mean, who would have ever thought Pittsburgh would start 2-0, Harrison? But they're the leader in the North, and Cincinnati, once again, has dug a hole for themselves.
Yeah, Cincinnati definitely still struggled with the run, allowing 4.7 yards per rush yesterday. But it was some of the play that they got specifically from Trey Hendrickson that helped them keep in that game. And man, oh man, Michael, that interception from Cam Taylor-Britt, the one hand, OBJ, but the defensive, oh my goodness, it was spectacular. And what made it even better for him is he was talking trash earlier in the week about Xavier Worthy first. So for him to be challenged by Mahomes on a pass attempt to Xavier Worthy and then make that interception, that was spectacular. And I think that's part of the reason, because of some of those plays they made defensively, Hendrickson, Cam Taylor-Britt, and the way that Zach Taylor was still able to construct somewhat of a good offense. Yes, you were right. They didn't convert in the red zone. But the way that they were able to say, okay, fine, you're going to take out Jamar Chase with Trent McDuffie and another defensive back. Fine, I'm going to get 9 targets to Mike Gesicki, and we're still going to be able to move down the field. Just imagine how more dynamic they can be when T. Higgins finally comes back. And I think that's the reason, Michael and Grace, that you have the Bengals still plus 190 to win the AFC North. They're right there. They believe the Baltimore Ravens are still plus 180. So it's not out the realm of possibility, even though they're 0-2, that they can get right back in the mix. The way they constructed that offense yesterday and made something of what seemed of nothing is definitely something we have to take note of.
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me, guys, Chiefs have a winning 20-16 record in the last 6 seasons when losing the turnover battle. That's not supposed to happen.
Wow.
So that just kind of, isn't that crazy? 20-16.
Yeah.
So that just kind of speaks to the greatness of Mahomes and Andy Reid there, kind of covering up for any deficiencies they might have. And speaking of deficiencies, you mentioned it, Michael, the offensive line allowing 4 quarterback hits, 2 sacks. Andy Reid had to take out Kingsley Suamataia.
Well done, Grace. Well done, Grace.
You.
You're better than Romo yesterday. Yeah, you well done.
Cheers.
Nice job. You keep pronouncing his name for us. You speak. He may be back in there. But that offensive line, look, I mean, that's going to be the issue. Kansas City decided to go with a rookie and a second-year player in Morris. That's going to be an issue all year long. And when they play against good teams who have a good rusher, they don't like to chip. They want to get 5 out in a route, and I think that's really important. But look, Mahomes is so tough. He's able to stay within the pocket. But think about it. The longest pass play was a touchdown to Rice. I mean, Cincinnati, for the most part, contained this passing offense. They had the 44-yarder to Rice for the touchdown. The second longest play was to Watson for 16 yards in the passing game. That's it. So they were very effective, and Mahomes couldn't hold on to the football. If Cincy could have played any run defense, they really would have handled the game, and I think that's going to be Cincy's. It's 2 weeks in a row Cincinnati could not get control of the run game. Think about this. Another thing, you just mentioned the stats. How about this? The Chiefs are 1 for 8 on third down and win the game. 1 for 8 on third down and win the game. I mean, that's remarkable. And, you know, they got outgained average per play. It just was they're able to be resilient, and in the fourth quarter, when they need to make a play, somehow they make a play, Harrison.
Yeah, no, and one thing to be concerned with the Kansas City Chiefs as well, we haven't mentioned yet. Isaiah Pacheco left the game with an injury, and the reporters that were there on the scene said he left in a walking boot. So that's one concern for this offense as well, especially when we found out that Hollywood Brown is going to the IR. And Travis Kelce still hasn't looked like Travis Kelce yet this season. So I know that it's Mahomes and everything, but there's still a modicum of concern for this offense going forward, even though they're 2-0 to start the season, Grace.
I know. It's hard for me to worry too much, though, because remember they got off to the slow start last season and then ended up being one of the best ATS teams, one of the best underdogs the rest of the way, and went on to win the whole thing. So, but you know what? Maybe a little bit of bad play that it'll underrate them in the market and then ends up being a good thing for us bettors down the line. That's kind of how I'm viewing this here. All right, so the Chiefs eke out a win. They fortunately were one of the favorites to do so. A lot of favorites did not. Ravens were one of those. We're going to talk about their loss to the Raiders next. You're watching the VSiN Morning Line.
Time. There's nothing more valuable. It's what drives everyone to make the most of every moment. We celebrate living large in the now. In a city where time disappears, we create experiences that electrify the soul and memories that will last forever. We go big, we go all night, and here, everyone is invited. So get loose and get loud.
This is Circa. You'll have the time of your life.
Monday on Follow the Money, a good Monday night football game. The Falcons take on the Eagles. We recap the NFL weekend, preview Week 4 college with Nick Bogdanovich, bookmaker from Circa, and 2 weeks left in the baseball season. Follow the Money weekdays, 4 to 7 Eastern, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Want to see who at VSiN is on a hot streak? Go to VSiN.com/picks to see all the selections and weekly leaderboard of VSiN hosts, writers, and guests. Become a VSiN Pro subscriber and get every pick sent to your inbox daily. Just head to VSiN.com/pro.
So, Paulie, have you had a chance to read the VSiN Daily yet?
Yeah, came in at 3 a.m. What's Bill doing up that late?
Well, rumor has it starts off with a 12-hour meditation session.
Then he just pours himself over film and live TV, really focusing and taking it all in. Bill's in with the biggest insiders, talking trade secrets, strategies, the whole nine, absorbing the info.
And then and only then can the writing process begin.
In Las Vegas, Bill's late night becomes your early morning. Wake up to the very latest betting insights in your inbox with the VSiN Daily. Sign up for free at vsin.com/newsletter.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line as we recap a wild and unexpected week 2 of the NFL season. One of those unexpected results, the Ravens coming into the week as the biggest favorite against the Raiders, and they blow a late lead thanks to Gardner Minshew's game-winning drive. So the Raiders win it 26-23, winning as an 8.5-point underdog. And this one goes over the 42.5. That was kind of an unexpected result as well. But more importantly, from a gaming perspective, for the second week in a row, the number 1 pick in the Circa Survivor falls. Just under 27% of the remaining entries were knocked out. So I think with the other losses, the other biggest losses were Lions, Jags, Cowboys, Colts, and 49ers. I don't think we're quite at 50% of the remaining entries left, but we're probably a little bit just over that. Either way, I mean, almost half the field is gone through the first 2 weeks. So it's been a crazy start to the season. But Michael, I see you're shaking your head. Any thoughts to this Circa contest so far?
Well, I mean, you have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, and that's usually a game that the Ravens kind of put the game away. But when you only allow Gardner Minshew to have 8 incomplete passes, look, I said this all summer long, this notion that Zach Orr can be 3 years as an assistant coach and then on Sunday get in the game and be able to call defenses and replace Mike McDonald and then replace Anthony Weaver, who's got experience in the field. I just think it's really hard. I do. I've said it all along. This is not a knock on Zach Orr, but it matters, experience. And as the game went on and as the game continued to go on, Gardner Minshew started to play really well. And when you look at the fourth quarter where they're able to come back in the fourth quarter, you know, the Raiders end up dominating the fourth quarter. They have the ball 8 minutes and 26 seconds. They get 9 first downs in the fourth quarter. There goes your survivor plays. And they're only 1 for 3 on third down. So their defensive front got tired. Their personnel's not as good. I still don't believe that Baltimore has an identity on who they want to be on offense. They look out of rhythm. They look like a team that has suffered a lot of offseason losses in terms of personnel, in terms of coaching. And they signed Henry to bring him in there, and I'm not sure they really understand who they want to be. They don't have an identity yet. I think that's the biggest issue, Harris, is I don't think they have an identity, and they're not nearly as good as they once were in terms of being able to shut teams down and get pressure on the passer like they did last year with Zach Orr calling the defense.
Yeah, and one of those things that really hampered them yesterday, at least as it pertains to those final moments in the game, was their inability with that younger offensive line or that newish offensive line to stop Max Crosby. He was in Lamar Jackson's face. There was no comfortability there, and we've talked about it before. There's not necessarily a lot of weapons in this Baltimore Ravens offense outside of Zay Flowers. Yes, you have Derrick Henry, but that's not somebody you're going to trust in a late-game situation. And as we look back at the defensive side of the ball with Zach Orr as the defensive coordinator, they had a real problem trying to stop Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers has now, through the first 2 weeks of the season, guys, he's leading all tight ends in targets and receiving yards. He's really come up as another option here for this Las Vegas Raiders defense, and he hurt the Ravens yesterday. And so now we go into week 3 of the NFL season, and I think everybody knows this, Grace. Do not trust a singular team in the AFC North in your survivor pools, because after the Bengals and the Ravens now, they have absolutely destroyed survivor pools left and right, and we saw that again on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely won't be going back to that division. I think for all the talk we had leading up to this season about John Harbaugh, you know, being one of the best coaches coming off rest and an early season, it's a shocking place for him to be in. He's only started a season 0-2 once in his 16 or so years with the Ravens. It was in 2015 when they finished 5-11, I think, his worst record with them. And it's only the team's second time going 0-2 since 2008. Another note on that, Lamar Jackson becomes the first reigning MVP to start 0-2 the following season. So what's going to come from this? John Harbaugh does have a message to the team. Let's take a listen.
We're going to play a 17-game season, and we will be defined by the next 15 games. So that's going to be our objective, to play the best 15 games we can, be the best football team we can be. And if we do that, then we're going to have a really good season, have a shot to win a lot of games and get in the playoffs and make a run. So that's what we have to do. Big picture, Short term, we got to go back and look at every little thing, continue to clean up the things that we know we can clean up and get better at that make a difference in games, and we'll continue to work very hard to do that.
Oh, looks like we lost Michael. Is Harrison still here? Oh, yay.
I am still present. The good thing for the Ravens here, Grace, is that when you look at this Ravens schedule, it's not as if they lost in the division as of yet, right? They've lost games to the Chiefs and they lost to the Raiders here. So I think they're still somewhat in a good position to win this division, even though the Steelers have started out 2-0 on the year and the Browns had an impressive win on the road yesterday. Everything is still very much on the table. Now, it does put a big spotlight on Sunday when they take on the Dallas Cowboys, who are coming off a loss themselves. But everything is still relatively on the table. You have to imagine that offensive line is going to get better over the course of time. And they have to get stops. One would envision they could do that. I think this really comes down to them just being able to get those timely stops, and yesterday they couldn't, and then find some more dynamic play in that offense. I think it's still on the table, Grace.
Yeah, you know what? Another thing we haven't talked about is Justin Tucker going 1 for 7.
Oh my goodness!
From 50 yards, and in the NFL, every kicker is making the 40 and lower, right? So what makes a legendary NFL kicker is making those 50-yarders, and I feel like he's kind of fallen out of that, the top tier conversation. 1 for 7 since the start of the 2023 season. But yesterday, you look at the final result, is decided by 3 points. That could have been the difference there.
Yeah, which is a shame, too, because you look around the NFL and you see other teams are really capitalizing on having those kickers that they can rely on. Whether you think about Harrison Butker, look how patient that Chiefs offense operated in their final drive, knowing that they could rely on Harrison Butker to get that W. Look at how the Texans were operating yesterday, knowing that they can count on Kymie Fairbairn to hit them some field goals. I think he hit a 56-yarder at one point. So the Ravens not having that reliable kicker, particularly when they don't have a dynamic offense in general, that could be the difference in some games. And we saw that yesterday, Grace.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson has now lost 3 straight starts. That's including the playoffs. For the first time since 2016. Where was he in 2016? He was in college at Louisville. So this is his worst start to an NFL season ever. And those 3, his worst stretch, sorry. But actually, I guess his worst start as well. All 3 of those losses coming to AFC West teams. So the NFL still goes to that division, at least on that side.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, and it was so it's so weird to me, Grace. How could they lose this game when the game script was in their favor? It's one thing if they were trailing the majority of the game and they had to come back and you're relying on Lamar Jackson to throw the ball to Zay Flowers and other people, but the game script was in their favor. They didn't have to necessarily protect against the pass rush of Max Crosby until the end of the game. They just could not get it flowing. The only thing that was successful as it pertains to any trends, as it pertains to the Ravens, the Ravens, was that under in the first half. Other than that, they really it just went against everything that we know about them. Everything that you rely upon with John Harbaugh. Look at the advantage. We discussed it last week. The advantages they have when they have teams traveling, and Harbaugh has the rest advantage. Nothing played out just like everything in week 2 of the NFL. Nothing played out as it was supposed to, or at least according to the analytics. That's for sure.
No, I think you're right. And it was what Michael was saying. I was going to bring this up too. I think they're still searching for that offensive identity. By time halftime rolled around, the run game only had 21 yards. Like, who is this Ravens team? And Derrick Henry started less than a yard per carry on his 7 attempts. He did rebound to finish with 84 yards and a touchdown. But very odd. And how do you let Gardner Minshew go on a game-winning drive? Especially, there were some coaching decisions from Antonio Pierce, too, that I thought were a little bit questionable. He was calling pass plays at the end of the game instead of run plays to wind down the clock. He gave Lamar 4 minutes to score. I mean, they still couldn't do it. And he was calling timeouts, too, on the Ravens' potential game-winning drive at the end there. Why would you want to give Lamar more time?
You know what was interesting too, and you pointed it out in terms of the Ravens not being able to get off the field. I looked at it in week 1. They had one of the lowest pressure rates in the NFL, and I got to go back and look at the week 2 numbers here. But if they're going to sit back and trust the coverage and not put pressure on the quarterback, well, the guys out there got to go out there and cover, and they just were not able to do that. Again, I think maybe Brock Bowers really introduced something to them that they weren't prepared for because he's a rookie. But in coverage yesterday during that last drive, they just weren't good, and it proved out yesterday. And so RIP to a lot of survivor pools, including mine.
Hey, it's good for me. I still have 1 entry remaining, thanks to the Texans, which even that one got a little dicey last night. But I'm still in it. So actually, you know what? Thank you, Raiders. All right, coming up on the other side, we're gonna get into some college ball and recap week 3. Hopefully, we're gonna get Michael Lombardi back on the line too. You're watching the VSiN Morning Line.
VSiN's got you covered for the start of the season with our football special. For $175, you'll get access to everything VSiN has to offer. With VSiN Pro, you'll receive daily picks straight to your inbox, detailed analysis on every game, and exclusive data like our betting splits to help you become a sharper bettor. Get all of this for just $175 through the Super Bowl. Or try a monthly subscription and get your first 30 days for only $9.99. Don't miss out on this offer. Sign up now at VSiN.com/subscribe.
Don't wait until fall to start betting the NFL. Get a jump start now with the VSiN NFL Betting Guide and get prepared for this NFL season like never before. The guide has in-depth breakdowns for all 32 teams, best bets from our VSiN experts, playoff predictions, award market previews, and more. The guide is out now, and the only way to get it is to be a VSiN Pro subscriber. Head to VSiN.com/pro to sign up and join the Sports Betting Network.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
The public got crushed in their NFL bets in week number 2. We'll lick our wounds a little bit later. Let's try and turn our attention to college football, where maybe some bettors are a bit more profitable. Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line. Harrison Sanford and Grace Remington joining you. And I was profitable on Saturday, and thankfully Grace helped me out. She had a couple plays that ended up panning out as a winner. Grace, let's run through some of the bets that you had this past weekend and what we might have learned. And well, let's kick it off with Mike Norvell's team, Florida State, who I cannot believe lost outright at home. It is team turmoil over there in Tallahassee, where you had Memphis getting the 7.
Yeah, I have secondhand embarrassment for Florida State at this point. I guess I wasn't bold enough to take Memphis outright. Shout out to anyone who did. But congrats to everyone who tailed Memphis +7. I'm glad that cashed for us. I think with Florida State, it's really just a developmental and recruiting problem at this point, because they have leaned on the transfer portal so much through Mike Norvell's time there. And now that the rest of the NCAA is getting a bit more competitive, it's becoming a bit more rare to find hits. And I mean, I talked about this after their first loss to the season. Even the coaching staff was shocked. Something's wrong with their eval, the way they're evaling their players, because they had really high expectations for these guys. The coaching staff just looks kind of shell-shocked when they're watching the results out there, and whatever is on paper is not matching the game results. But shout out to Memphis. They are a perennially, that's how you say it. They are a legit team. They could be a G5 contender in the playoff now. But we cashed the Memphis +7. Go us. A few other hits or bets I want to get to. So we went 3-2 overall. Not the best. One of those was unlucky. K-State, the first quarter cover was unlucky. That was K-State -1.5. So Arizona had the ball first. They converted a third down that had no business being converted. It was Noah Fafita under pressure. He was falling to the ground, tried to get the pass off, and he did. But it kind of reminded me of Tua's pass on Thursday Night Football the night prior, where he was trying to throw the ball away when he was getting hit and tackled to the ground. And that ended up, it was like a lame duck pass, and it was returned for a pick 6. That's what I thought was going to happen while I was watching this live. I thought it was going to be a pick 6 in K-State's favor. But so that was super unlucky. But K-State ended up covering 18 seconds into the second quarter. That's what it was. So it kind of did go the way I thought. It was just unlucky and then a little bit late. So I would bet that one again. That should have been a win. We should be 4-1. The Bama-Wisconsin first half under, that hit easily. That game script went exactly how I thought. Tennessee, we get the first quarter cover, the 12-point cover. They ended up scoring 30 points in the first quarter and even went for an onside kick. So Tennessee is out for blood this year. And then the FIU play was just a whiff. I should have known. I actually earlier in the day had live bet Central Michigan, who was FIU's opponent the week prior. And their game result against Central Michigan kind of went into my handicapping for this one. So once I live bet Central Michigan, I was like, this is not good for my FIU play later in the day. I ended up cashing the Central Michigan one and FIU lost. There was a lot of luck in that game prior, so I should have taken that into consideration. But overall, 3-2, not a losing weekend, and should be 4-1. So I feel good about the bets.
Hey, as a wise man once said, you can't go broke making a profit, and that is exactly what happened. So we keep on churning out the college football bets, and we'll have our eye to the upcoming week here later on in the show. But let's just focus in on everything that we saw and how it could pertain to the Heisman race. You mentioned how dynamic Tennessee was. I know it was Kent State, but they absolutely blew the doors off of them just in the first quarter. And you mentioned that bet hit in the Alabama and Wisconsin game. Man, oh man, Jalen Milroe really turned it up, and it didn't help the cause for the Badgers that their quarterback got knocked out of the game within the first quarter. But that Alabama offense, a lot more dynamic than we really thought. But as we look at the Heisman, and we'll talk about those two guys later, let's focus in on what happened with Texas, who is now the #1 overall seed in the AP poll after their win. And their win came without Quinn Ewers on the field for majority of the time. Left the game with the abdomen injury. Arch Manning came in. Quinn Ewers was the favorite, but now he is week to week in terms of getting back on the field, but he's no longer the favorite to win the Heisman. As you could see, as you saw there on the screen, Cam Ward is now the favorite. But what is your evaluation of Texas now as they move forward with Arch Manning, at least for the next week, maybe the next two?
Yeah, well, I think Texas will be okay. They have UL Monroe and Mississippi State next. So I think they should tell Quinn, take all the time you need. They probably, aren't too worried with Arch Manning back there too. Arch Manning has entered the Heisman conversation, by the way. He had preseason
odds. That's wild
of,
to me.
Yeah. 150-1 were his preseason odds. And I actually had a friend in the industry kind of jokingly say, hey, if you need a long shot, here's Arch. If Quinn Ewers gets hurt, what do you know? It happens week 3, and now Arch Manning odds are 16-1. I've seen them at a market low of 12-1. But he comes in, he scores 2 touchdowns on his first 3 snaps of the game. His first pass attempt was a 19-yard touchdown, and then the second play of the next drive, he had a 67-yard rushing touchdown. He finishes the game 9 of 12 for 223 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, and is now the 7th shortest odds in the Heisman race. So, maybe the last name has something to do with it, but he's doing exactly what he should be doing in a backup role and against an opponent like UTSA. UTSA, by the way, is not your daddy's UTSA. This is not a good team, which is why I think it's kind of interesting that Texas jumps Georgia, because Texas has played, let me pull it up here, Colorado State, which is not a good team, Michigan, that's a quality win, UTSA. Meanwhile, Georgia, let me pull this up, Clemson, which is, not the Clemson of past, but still a legitimate win, Tennessee Tech, and Kentucky, which is a legit team too. So Georgia still has the better schedule here. The numbers aren't as pretty because, Texas is coming off of 52-0 win, a 56-7 win. I guess style points matter, but Georgia still has not allowed a touchdown in 3 games. You know who else hasn't allowed a touchdown in 3 games? Ole Miss. And you see them right there at number 5. They beat Wake Forest. They beat Wake Forest so bad, Harrison. I don't know if you heard this. They were supposed to have a home and home. You saw? Okay, they were supposed to have a home and home series.
They said no. They said no. I'm good. I'm good.
But that is demoralizing. But Wake Forest, that's a legitimate team because they've had a little bit of success recently too, with the slow mesh offense. So I think this Texas jumping in the number 1 spot is a little bit of an overreaction. In the end, it doesn't really matter because it's just the AP poll. But yeah, I mean, Texas, man, it's going to be awesome. I'm super excited to see Arch Manning the rest of the way. We'll get to see him for at least these next 2 weeks here.
Yeah, you mentioned style points as it pertains to Texas and why that could help them at the number 1 overall seed. I think that's maybe something we should have applied and we should definitely think of going forward. And I'm mentioning that because Notre Dame went into their game against Purdue, 10.5-point favorites. They end up winning 66-7. And obviously, they're still probably on the outside looking in to get into the college football playoff race. So they understand they can't just win. They have to win big. And that's exactly what they did. They were laying 7.5. Obviously, they won by more than that. And the over cashes on that. Your thoughts on Notre Dame, or at least that performance there, because I think that says to us, if there are teams that went into the season with a real chance, even though they have 1 loss, they're going to be out for blood. And that's exactly what Marcus Freeman's team was.
Yeah, I think the path to the playoffs is still difficult for Notre Dame. Props to them, though, for bouncing back. I was a little bit nervous for them when I saw the closing line. It closed at 7 pregame. I think the look ahead was 16. During the week, it was 10.5. It closed at 7. So it looked like there was respected money coming in on the Boilermaker side. That's not public money moving it 3 whole points in one day. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, they did what they have to do because, look, the committee voters for the playoff, they suffer from recency bias like the rest of us. When we get to the end of the season and they're just kind of like going down Notre Dame's schedule, they're going to see 66-7. They're going to forget about that northern Illinois loss. And by the way, Northern Illinois is still ranked, which is that a conspiracy theory? Are people keeping them in the poll to make Notre Dame look better? They lost to a ranked team. I don't know. So it's good they went out there and handled business. I don't know. I still don't like their odds to make the playoff, but Marcus Freeman did what he had to do.
He did what he had to do for sure. We'll keep our eye on Notre Dame, and obviously we'll keep our eye on the Heisman market as well. As we pointed out, Cam Ward is now the favorite at plus 550. Jackson Dart has gone from plus 850 to 7-1. Jalen Milroe, 12-1, now to 7-1 after his performance against Wisconsin, where they were just spectacular. And as we pointed out, Arch Manning started at 100-1, now 16-1 to win the Heisman. What a world we are living in college football. When we return, we have Carl Johnson.
In the heart of downtown Las Vegas, a sports oasis awaits. Stadium Swim, the ultimate outdoor amphitheater, built for the ultimate sports fan, with a colossal screen that brings the game closer than ever. Reserve a daybed, private cabana, or lounge in the center of it all. 6 pools to dive into as the game heats up. And the best part, there's never an off-season. Open 365 days a year. Stadium Swim, it's always spectator season.
Looking for the ultimate sports betting podcasts? VSiN has got you covered. With a wide range of podcasts covering every major sport, we're here to help you make smarter bets every season. The Baseball Betting Show with Greg Peterson gives you daily insights into finding value on each day's MLB card. And check out Long Shots, where we deep dive into the world of golf betting, providing you with expert insights to help you bet every tournament. Find all of these podcasts and more at VSiN.com/podcasts or your favorite podcast platform.
You're watching the VSiN Morning Line right here on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network.
Welcome back into the VSiN Morning Line. Grace Remington and Harrison Sanford with you while Michael Lombardi goes on a little internet journey. We'll have him here later on in the show. At this point, we would like to welcome our next guest onto the show, Carl Johnson. You can find him at Jack Johnson on the Twitter/X machine. He is the Beau Rivage Sportsbook Director, joining us with some of his bookmaking insights from a wild week 2 of the NFL season. Carl, thanks for joining us today. 7 underdogs winning straight up. Only the third time that's happened in week 2 in the last 9 seasons. How did the book make out this weekend?
Yeah, well, Grace, Harrison, good morning to you guys. Yeah, wow, what a day. I mean, it's just funny how it works out. I mean, Saturday, Grace, everybody in the book won money, and then Sunday, I mean, I was telling you off air, Thomas Gable had texted me after the noon kicks here, and he says, hey, can you ever remember a slate going like that? And the answer was no, I don't ever remember a slate going like that. I mean, just every way possible for the book to come out on that early slate of games we just did, and it continued throughout the day.
Carl, as we looked at that slate, yeah, it was a bunch of underdogs covering the spread, but it was also what we saw, the unders hitting at a very successful rate. What could you say about the unders hitting, not just so far in week number 2, but overall in the season?
Yeah, I mean, typically that's kind of what we need. The public likes to bet overs for whatever reason. They're getting a little bit better at it now that shows like this are on. People are getting more educated as far as the totals go. But look, Sunday it just didn't matter, because of the way people tie in their parlays. We could have won 2 of these money line games like we did. For example, we could have won the Saints money line and the Raiders money line. That would have killed probably 75% of all parlay bets. So it just worked out. But yeah, you're right. Those totals, the way they're running, you just never know. And I've said it from the get-go, there's just not that large of a gap between, if you look at what happened yesterday, I'm not impressed with any of the top-tier teams in my power rankings. In other words, I can't see a clear-cut favorite from the top 10 in my power rankings. I just can't. I think they can all beat each other. But what's happening is that my bottom 10 or 12 teams, they're playing the better football. They're playing good football. They're surprising us the most, in my opinion. So I can tell you one of the things that I'm going to do on my power ratings. Don't overreact, but I am going to close my gap. I have a range of 12 points on my power ratings. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to close that gap a little bit. I'm going to go from like 12 probably to 10. So that means I'm going to be moving some of these teams up. I mean, look at the Raiders yesterday, Arizona. I mean, those teams are at the bottom of my rankings and probably everybody else's rankings. So they're going to get some love. I'm not going to overreact too much on the top tier teams, San Fran, Detroit, the Ravens. I mean, those 3 teams get beat. That's my top 3. Dallas gets destroyed by the Saints. I'm not going to overreact there, but I am going to close the gap on that.
I'm glad you just went into the gap in your power rankings, because that's where I was going to go next. 2 weeks in a row, the biggest favorite of the week loses outright. So what does that say about either the product on the field or our expectation?
Yeah, Grace, I think it's just parity. I mean, I think we're at a level in professional football now where every team can beat every team. I mean, if you're looking at it on paper, you go, oh, there's no way the Ravens are going to get beat here, But when you play the game, I mean, these guys can all play, and they're like, it's just not a lot of a gap between the best teams and the worst teams. And, people just need to take that into consideration. And I think they're realizing it, but, that's the way it is. Anybody can win any given weekend.
Speaking of the market overreacting, there are a lot of people down on Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons after they lost last week. They take on the Philadelphia Eagles tonight. Where are you seeing the action in that game, and what is your insight on the game itself?
Yeah, so for us, the spot is that typically we're going to be bet the Falcons here. I think the Eagles, probably nationwide are getting about 80% of the money and then probably about 80% of the ticket count. For us, it's a little bit different. Being a regional book, we're going to get some Atlanta love here. We're probably going to end up running about 60% money, probably 65% tickets on the Eagles. So it's going to be a little bit thinner for us on our needs than some of these books in the country. But they're going to bet us the Falcons. To be perfectly honest with you, with all the dogs that have covered this week, it would not surprise me if the Eagles don't put a pretty good game together. It could be, but the Falcons are much improved. A lot of people are looking forward to seeing what this team can do. So it'll be interesting.
Kind of staying in that area, have you seen any reactions to the division odds market in the NFC South, considering the Bucs and Saints start to the season and then the Falcons slow start?
Well, look, I got to tell you, it's a breath of relief for us to see the Saints off to such a good start. And look, yesterday, wow, that just came out of nowhere. They punched that team in the face from the get-go and never let up. But look, we took some pretty heavy action on Tampa Bay in the NFC South. So we've got a ton of liability there. And to be perfectly honest with you, before the season started, I didn't think it was any way possible that the Saints would contend for this division. I just didn't. But they're looking good. It's early. They got a long way to go. But we have a ton of futures out with Tampa Bay right now that we're just trying to sweat.
Carl, as we get into Monday, we'll probably be looking at the injury reports for a number of teams as we go into the upcoming week. But probably the biggest injury that happened in week number 2 happened on Thursday with Tua Tagovailoa. What type of movement have you seen because of that injury, and how do things shape up for you in terms of the betting markets and in your power rankings with the Miami Dolphins considering his injury?
Yeah. So, what a shame. I hope that guy does the right thing, what's good for him and his family. But, he's had a bad run of it for the last couple of years. Look, we're going to open that game. Dolphins are at Seattle. We're going to open around 6.5 and 41.5, with Seattle being favored. I'm not going to adjust. I typically what I do is I'll adjust my power rankings after tonight. It gives me time to kind of look at some stuff and see what I want to do. But if you notice, Harrison, it seems like every time a team has a major, I look at Green Bay, every time a team has a major injury, the public perception is, oh man, Miami's going to get destroyed. And it just, for whatever reason, it just seems like it never works out that way. It seems like the team with the most injuries wins sometimes. So I'm not going to overreact. I will probably they will be moving down on my power rankings, but I'm going to wait and see how it plays out and just take a real conservative approach to it.
We have about a minute left here, Carl, so I do want to squeeze in a college football question. Yeah. LSU, South Carolina. I know you got a lot of Bayou Bengal fans down there. Yeah. What was your reaction to that game, and how did the book make out?
Yeah, look, like I said, for Saturday, we didn't have too many good outcomes. We got just absolutely destroyed. That was one of our better outcomes. Because they bet us so heavily LSU. South Carolina was a good outcome for us, and so was Kentucky. But getting back to South Carolina, look, I'm born and raised in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I grew up a Tiger fan. I'm not a big Tiger fan anymore, but it just seems like that was my biggest disappointment for the weekend is how they played. I thought they would bounce back strong, but it just seems like they're playing to the level of competition that they're facing. So I was going to ask Michael this morning if he thinks that's part of coaching or what. But my biggest disappointment was LSU this weekend.
Yeah, well, Brian Kelly lives to see another week. No more angry fists pounding on the podium this time.
Yeah.
All right. Carl Johnson, thanks so much for joining us. You can find him at Jick Johnson, the sportsbook director of Beau Rivage. Always appreciate his insights. Coming up on the other side, we are getting back into the NFL, previewing tonight's game. You're watching the VSiN Morning Line.
A new football season means a new lineup on VSiN. Start your day with sharp betting analysis on